Hey guys, welcome back to this segment where we'll be following up a bit on our topic from yesterday. So we covered a little bit about how, what kind of changes that the world can do and what's the impact on India as a country. And on this video, we'll be talking a bit more about what India can do as a country to adapt to the impending doom or crisis that is climate change.
And also what you can do as an individual to get India to do the right thing. So to start with, what can India do? My view on this, and I have to reiterate, it's just my view, so you can disagree, Vyaas. But the way I look at it is that a lot of literature in ecological economics shows that you can achieve a high quality of life with relatively modest resource consumption and energy consumption. A good example of this would be a country like Spain that has a much lower per capita income than the US, but because of the way it distributes, it has a life expectancy that's 5 years higher and is better on almost every other quality of life indicator that you can think of. So in a lot of ways, India needs to start thinking beyond just the GDP as the be all and end all of development and success, and needs to take a more holistic approach towards meeting the needs of the nation. So as of now, at a global level, we overshoot our resource use capacity by about 56% every year. That is, if we are allowed to use 100%, we use 156, and that is not sustainable. So that has to go down. We're already overshooting by quite the margin.
Wait, you mean in India or?
I mean globally.
Okay.
But for that, every country has to think about how it uses its resources, and India is no exception to that. So our development cannot take the same path that other countries have taken in the past. In thinking about it, so we need to keep in mind what are some ways that we can meet the basic needs of our population, which is basically what? Food, energy, education, healthcare, transportation, housing, entertainment. I think this covers the basic consumption basket for most Indians, right? So we need to think about how we can meet all of this without excess resource use and excess energy use. And there are many sectors of our economy where energy use or use of a particular resource is very high. So we have to think about how we can be more efficient about it. India has, for example, 4% of the world's usable water and 17% of the world's population. 85% of our water use is in agriculture. So we have to think about how we can be more water efficient in our agriculture. We perhaps shouldn't be growing as much sugarcane or paddy, which are very water intensive crops, and we should change our cropping patterns to be more sustainable. So that's one example, right? And these are the kind of things that if you know farmers, you should talk to them about it, because it really can make a big difference in the stability of their income and what they can do for their families. Soil quality, water table depletion is a huge issue in India. But even beyond that, there are other things that the country can do. So think about how the global economy is structured. In all global forums, the Indian government has to push a few things. One is technology transfer as it relates to battery storage and things like that, because that is going to rapidly accelerate this climate transition for us, which we need. Another would be climate financing. For poorer countries to adapt, richer countries have to supply the financing for it in some form or the other. And already they have made several promises on that, 100 billion a year. They've not yet met those promises. We're getting closer to meeting them. But this is really important. The next thing would be global trading arrangements and the way that emissions are even calculated. For example, China is the biggest emitter in the world, but a lot of that is because it manufactures for use in other countries, right? So rich countries basically export their emissions and their pollution to other countries, which should no longer be allowed.
So when you said that 28%, right?
Hmm.
So is there any study or research or a number that you can say, you know what, that 20 needs to be split, and what strictly China's is this number, which is less than 28? Do you
Right.
have
So
like
there
a
are
number
studies like that. I don't know the numbers, but
Okay.
yeah. So the way we think about these things needs to change so that the entire supply chain can be made more sustainable, as
Right.
opposed to just sending the problem
Right.
elsewhere.
So it's not just one country anymore, because when you look at the pandemic, so after the pandemic, you've got a lot of supply chain, and when you talk about supply chain, the major is through the sea routes,
Right.
and you've got these massive carriers, right, with over, I don't know, 500,000 containers stuck in the coast of the US or India, because they don't have
Right.
space to unload to dock. So they have a 2-week waiting period now, which was initially one day. So you have that 2-week period of wasting all that resources, keeping it afloat,
Right.
the manpower. So all of that is lost, and you don't have the products delivered on time, right? So you have bottlenecks everywhere, and it's going to be very hard to go back to that normalcy. So
That's true.
that's the thing about making a mistake, right? You make the mistake, there are immediate repercussions, and you have the cost of going back to the normal wherever you were. So you've got to correct that mistake, and correcting a mistake is much harder than just solving that mistake for that moment.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to think about global trading arrangements and how they are in some ways rigged in favor of the current major trading powers. How it can be made more equitable to lower income countries so that they can also develop, while at the same time ensuring labor rights and economic standards are followed. Because right now you look at poorer countries, they are able to skirt these things because you don't have strong rule of law there. And that is the one way in which they can undercut wealthier countries, because that gives them an advantage. So we should also work on global trading arrangements, and Bretton Woods institutions, IMF and World Bank, how they function, how voting rights works in institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. For example, the average Bangladeshi has about 1/24 of voting rights of the average American, I think, something like that. So there are all these inequitable global structures that have been there for a very long time, tax havens that enable tax evasion. All of this makes it harder for governments to have the resources to finance the climate transition. So it's not just about the climate transition, it's also about climate justice. So this is something that needs to be seen at a global level. But at an all India level, what we need to think about is India is one of the second largest importer of fossil fuel energy in the world. We need to cut down on that. We need to go in massively on clean energy, because our India's energy use is going to triple in the next couple of decades at the very least. So this is not a sustainable trajectory, and we really, really need to ramp up our production of clean energy and think about energy storage and issues like that. So we need to be spending a lot of money in those kinds of things, public money, public investment, because in sectors like this, it really helps to have a lot more public investment, grants, research, things like that. We need to be able to replace, for example, the use of stoves that use firewood and things like that, which contribute a lot to indoor air pollution. So on a policy level, there are many things that India can do that will rapidly improve Indian people's lives on these issues. But it also requires a global effort, because India acting alone will not be enough. It's a problem that was created globally and cannot be solved by India alone. But the really interesting thing here is, because India is so low cost on everything, if India is able to find solutions to these problems, India can export these, and that can have a worldwide impact. So there is no solution to climate change that doesn't include India. And there is no bright future for India that doesn't involve solving climate change. Having said that, there is plenty of reason for hope, because in the last 10 years, the cost of renewables like solar and wind have fallen by more than 90%, where in much of the world today, it is cheaper to start a new solar power plant than to run an existing coal power plant. So the economics of this is changing. India is now at a stage where this climate transition is not so much a cost as an opportunity. The sooner you go in that direction and the bigger you go in that direction, the more jobs that are going to be created, high paying, good quality jobs, and the better it is going to be for the economy, for the health of the people, for all kinds of things, for financial stability. So I think India has every reason to do everything it can to tackle climate change and to not go about it in a half-hearted manner. And I think that if we follow the right policy mix, there is plenty of hope that the worst impacts can be mitigated, and that India will be in a good place to say we do 20, 30 years of solid mitigation. I think India will be in a good place to provide for all Indians' needs, basic needs, while at the same time having a stable climate. That's a realistic and achievable goal, and you shouldn't let anyone tell you that it's not possible. Now, the question is, what can you as individuals do to help nudge the government to get there? Because unless there is a large political incentive to do it, governments do not tend to act on these things, right? You don't see a lot of elite consensus on these matters at this point. So, Vyaas, what do you think? What do you think individuals could and should do to?
I mean, we've had this conversation before, right? Like, what kind of impact, or what kind of when you look at a problem, does it need to come from the government, or do individual actions matter? Like, that's the case with any topic that you take, right? And even in this problem, you covered the major bases when it comes to the point about governments not doing enough and doing more. But on an individual level, something that I've reiterated, maybe you can add a few more points on what people can do, but the most important is awareness, right? So in terms of point number one being awareness, point number two, more importantly, stopping the spread of misinformation, stopping the spread of fake news, because it's a rampant everywhere. And well, stopping the spread of fake news on WhatsApp might seem minor, right? So it might seem like you're not making impact much, but it's still something you make a conscious effort to read about something. You make a conscious effort to look at whether the source is right, and that takes time, right? You need to spend your own time and do all that research. So so once you correct yourself in that one time, well, you're not going to make that same error again about climate change. So let's say you get a stat like, well, India's only emitting 2% global emissions, and US is emitting 50%. That information is going to spread on WhatsApp, right? Like if it's worded really well, and if it's the right time, like a World Climate Summit, and then you have a video of World Climate Summit, just like a 10-second clip, it's going to happen. I'm sure it's happening, right? So stopping the rampant misinformation is a good first step. But when it comes to individual actions, I guess the little things in terms of not in terms of using the bus, public transportation, and installing solar panels, like you said, if it's an individual home, right? So meeting your energy needs through that avenue. Yeah, those are something that people can consider, right? So and there's a lot of companies as well that are doing well, the electric automobiles and electric vehicles, and this change is forcing a lot of the established companies to rethink and move into electric. That's a good thing, right? By supporting, by talking about companies like Ather and the electric vehicle industry, just by talking about it, it's you're making a decision in terms of investing your time. So I think that's the biggest thing. I don't want to go into details about saving water and in terms of turning off the taps while you brush. Those are little things, but I don't know if that's going to make an impact, right? Like
Right.
to me as a personal choice, I don't do that. Like I turn off the water while I brush my teeth. But since childhood, since I was in school, I used to hear that every time saying, well, to save the planet, we need to turn off the water, the tap when you brush. Well, yes, I get what they're trying to do, right? If you're a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, you want that to happen. But on a more important note, that is not going to help much, is my opinion, right? Those little things is not going to matter that much, right?
Yeah, just
Deepak,
a quick
what do you
stat
think?
here. 200 corporations in the world are responsible for 70% of historical emissions globally.
Right.
So you can act as an individual and it does matter, but that is not going to be the defining impact. The biggest thing you can do, as Vyaas said, is to create awareness. And you can do this by also organizing, right? Within your own company, if you're an employee, you can get people together and talk about how the company can reduce its own emissions. And that kind of thing, some companies do take it seriously. If you're a shareholder, you can you can get together with other shareholders and in an AGM or something like that, ask how that company plans to reduce its emissions, what their plans are, how much they currently emit, require them to release those kind of statistics and plans, and see to it that they are held accountable. If you are, I mean, just as a citizen, right? When you vote in any election, check what every party is saying about climate change. And once they are in power, if they are not keeping their word, if they're not implementing what they've promised on this topic, raise a ruckus about it. Talk to people about it. Call them out for failing on delivering their promises. Because the more you do that, the more their incentives change. And then they see that it is in their own interest to act on this. It's already in India's economic interest to act on it. We just need to make sure that it's in the interest of politicians to act as well.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to end on two stories. So one is a personal story, and the other is another person that I've admired in the last 1 year. So since I'm in Chennai right now in India, and so I work at a medical device company, and so there's about 15 employees here, and the amount of knowledge that they have about farming and agriculture is just amazing, right? So the stuff that Deepak discussed today, or the topics that are covered in this week, well, they can tell that to me with more detail in a span of 15 minutes. So the topics that we've covered over this week, they know a lot more about farming, and they know a lot more about how it impacts the planet. And they know a lot more about how solar can help those villages, or solar can help those individual homes. So there is a vast knowledge that's already within people. And they are working in a medical device company. And out of 15 people, 10 people have some connection to farming. Their parents or relatives are already doing, and they've already worked in the fields. So when Deepak says majority are already are working, it just means that they are knowledgeable people. Like they have better ideas to do the same thing. And the idea of mixed cropping, right? I talked about that with a colleague 2 weeks back. Well, how sugarcane is water intensive, rice is water intensive. I had that conversation with you, and I went back to my office, and they knew a lot more about that. Like they were telling me, you know what, this it's got to be this temperature, it's got to be that temperature, and I like details. So it was a fascinating conversation. So there's a lot of smart people working on this. There's a lot of good ideas. There's a lot of people talking about it. So it's just that we've got to keep up that in whatever situation arises. And the second story is something about is this person, we'll have that link in the description as well. This person called Piyush Manush. So he's been doing a lot in Salem, and kind of pretty much doing those little things, right? Like you said, organizing and getting a group of people together, action. And then he's been doing all of that for the last 25 years. And it's just really great when he talks about how he was able to turn a lake filled with plastic completely, and it's now clean, and it's now usable water, and you've got flora and fauna flourishing in that area. So he's doing things like that, right? So, well, a common man who's watching this, or like a person like me, I wouldn't be able to get out of my full-time job and do something like that. But just by giving these people attention, like just by talking about these people or watching a video about them instead of a show on Netflix, so that's change. However insignificant it might seem, I feel like that's something in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think those are the 2 points that I wanted to convey. And Deepak, you got any other nuggets to share?
Closing thoughts. Yeah, I mean, just reiterating what we've already said, be hopeful, don't let anyone get you down. All of this is scary, but it doesn't mean it's insurmountable. So we should just remember that there is a bright future ahead for us, and it's up to us to fight for it, for our sakes, for our children's sake, for our grandchildren's sake.
Yeah.
Because the future depends on our generation now.
Yeah. Let's end with that. Smile on our face.
Oh, you're still here? Well, thanks for getting to the end of the video. Hey, while you're still here, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get new updates when we post videos. Also, make sure to check out these equally exciting videos as well. Have you pressed it yet? Come on, you have 5 seconds left. 3, 2, press it now.